At my husband's funeral, my daughter-in-law prevented me from sitting in the front row because that place was reserved for the new lady of the house. I smiled quietly to myself. Later, when I disclosed the truth about the will, she turned completely pale. "I am happy to have you here. Stay with me until the end of my story and write in the comments the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has traveled." The funeral home was filled with silence, except for a soft, sorrowful melody playing in the background. I stood near the entrance, gripping my purse so firmly that my knuckles went white. After 45 years of marriage, I had become a widow. James was gone, and it felt as if a part of me had vanished with him. I smoothed the fabric of my black dress, the one James always said made me look graceful, and took a deep breath before moving further inside. Numerous familiar faces turned to me. Some showed pity, while others expressed genuine sorrow. Yet I was only looking for one face, my son Tom. I noticed him sitting in the front row. His shoulders drooped as he gazed at the casket holding his father. Beside him was Violet, my daughter-in-law, sitting straight as a rod, her hair perfectly arranged despite the somber event. Even in mourning, she appeared flawless. I started to walk toward them, aiming for the vacant seat beside Tom. I wanted to be near my son today, to hold his hand and share our sorrow together. However, just as I approached the chair, Violet rose from her seat. Her expression was cold and deliberate, as though she had anticipated this very moment. "Helen," she stated, her voice just loud enough for those nearby to catch, "that seat is reserved strictly for family." I blinked in disbelief. "I am family, Violet. I am his wife." A faint, cruel smile curved on her lips. "You are his wife. This seat belongs to the new head of the household." She adjusted her skirt, sat back down, and placed her designer handbag on the chair I had been walking toward. Tom never even glanced up. He simply stared straight ahead, either not hearing or choosing to ignore what had unfolded. The atmosphere suddenly felt suffocating. I was aware of dozens of eyes fixed on me, waiting to see how I would respond. My cheeks burned with shame, but I refused to grant Violet the pleasure of witnessing my breakdown. "Not here and not now." "So," I quietly said, turning to find a seat in the second row. As I settled down, I caught whispered remarks around me. "Poor Helen," someone muttered. "Violet has always been so domineering." I kept my gaze forward and my posture upright, just as James had taught me. "Never let them see you falter, Ellie," he used to say. "You are stronger than they realize." The ceremony began, though I scarcely heard the words. My thoughts were filled with memories of James, his laughter, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, and how every Sunday morning he would bring me wildflowers picked from our garden. And now he was gone, leaving me utterly alone with The daughter-in-law had always harbored resentment toward me, and my son seemed to have forgotten I even existed. This was not the first time Violet had deliberately pushed me aside. Over the years, her actions became bolder and more blatant. Initially, she would simply forget to invite me to family dinners. Later, she went as far as planning vacations during holidays so that Tom and the children could not come to visit me. She even began suggesting to others that I was losing my memory, planting doubts about my mental state. James had long been my protector against her harshness. "She is just insecure," he would say, trying to maintain harmony within the family. "Give her time." But time only made Violet more resolved to remove me from the family picture altogether. After the service, everyone gathered at our house, the place James and I had carefully built together over many years. Yet, as I walked inside, I felt more like a visitor than the homeowner. Violet had taken control, organizing the catering staff and accepting condolences as if she were the widow in mourning, not me. "Mom," Tom finally came over, awkwardly asking, "Are you holding up okay?" Before I could respond, Violet appeared beside him. "Tom, your mother must be tired. Maybe she should rest upstairs while we look after the guests," I replied firmly, locking eyes with her. I am fine. This is my home and these are my friends. A flash of something passed through Violet's eyes. Was it irritation or a stubborn resolve? Of course it is, Helen, for now, she said, linking her arm through Tom's. She took him by the hand and led him away, leaving me standing alone in the entrance of my own house. I watched as she bent down to my son's ear, whispering something that made him nod in agreement. There I was, unseen, though completely visible, like a shadow in my own life. Yet what Violet did not realize, what none of them were aware of, was that James had planned for this moment. My calm, insightful husband had seen through Violet's act long ago and had made preparations. Glancing around at the home filled with 45 years of memories, I allowed myself a quiet, secret smile. Let Violet pretend to be the lady of the house for now. Tomorrow would bring the reading of the will and reveal a truth that would erase that arrogant grin from her face. James always said timing was everything, and very soon, Violet would discover just how right he had been. That night, sleep escaped me. The house felt different without James's steady breathing beside me. At dawn, I rose and wandered from room to room, tracing my fingers over the furniture we had selected together. I recalled how this Victorian house on Maple Street had been our dream. When we first walked through it in 1975, it was in ruins with peeling wallpaper, squeaky floors, and everything outdated. But James grabbed my hand gently and whispered, "I see us growing old here, Ellie." We spent weekends removing wallpaper, sanding floors, and good-naturedly debating over paint colors. James had built the back porch with his own hands, working through warm summer evenings while I brought him iced tea. He offered him lemonade. When Tom was born, James transformed the small study into a nursery, decorating the walls with blue sailboats. Now I found myself standing in our kitchen, sunlight pouring through the windows. James had installed the marble countertops we had saved for 5 years to buy. The oak cabinets were restored by his own hands. Every inch of this home held fragments of our shared history. Suddenly, footsteps broke my thoughts. Violet appeared in the doorway, dressed flawlessly in a black pencil skirt and a silk blouse. "You are up early," she remarked, her voice implying some kind of disapproval. "I have always been an early riser," I responded, pouring myself a cup of coffee. "Would you like some?" She disregarded my offer. "Tom and I were speaking last night. We believe it might be wise for you to start thinking about other living options." The coffee cup almost slipped from my grasp. "Excuse me? This house is far too big for just one person, especially at your age," she said, her tone sickly sweet with feigned concern. "There is a wonderful assisted living facility nearby. Tom could visit more frequently." This was by no means Violet's first attempt to push me aside. When Tom and Violet married 12 years ago, I was genuinely happy for them. Tom had been lonely after his divorce, and Violet seemed to bring brightness into his life. The initial signs were quite subtle. Violet would casually forget to inform me about family events. She would make sure comments about my outdated clothing or old-fashioned notions were common. Whenever I visited their house, she would whisper to Tom, just loud enough for me to catch her words. "Your mother seems out of sorts today." James noticed it as well. "That woman has sharp edges," he remarked after one particularly stressful Christmas dinner when Violet had corrected almost everything I said. Yet he always tried to keep the peace. "She is Tom's choice, Helen. We have to accept that," he reminded me. The situation grew worse when James was diagnosed with heart trouble 3 years ago. Violet began implying I was incapable of properly caring for him. "This might be too big a responsibility for someone your age," she told me, as if I had not been looking after my husband for more than 40 years. She even attempted to persuade Tom that we should sell our home and move into a care facility. "For the safety of your parents," she insisted. James put his foot down firmly. "I want to stay in the house I built, not some sterile institution," he told Tom without hesitation. For once, our son supported us. Now, standing in my kitchen with Violet, suggesting I leave my home just one day after burying my husband, I felt a surge of anger I rarely showed. "This is my home, Violet," I said softly. "James and I built it together. I'm not leaving." She sighed as if I was being unreasonable. "Helen, be realistic. You are 70 years old. This house has stairs. The upkeep alone." I refused. My voice was steady with resolve. My tone was more forceful than I had planned, but I was tired of being pushed around. A brief flash of annoyance and anger appeared on Violet's face before she regained her composure. "Well, we can talk about this after the will is read. Things might become clearer then." And so came the moment of the will reading. Naturally, that was the core of the matter. Violet believed James had left everything to Tom, which would essentially grant her control. She had been hovering like a vulture, waiting to swoop in and claim what was rightfully mine. What she did not realize was that 6 months ago, James had asked me to drive him to his lawyer's office. He had been unusually quiet that day. "What are we doing here, James?" I asked as we parked. "Making sure you are cared for, Ellie," he said, squeezing my hand. "No matter what happens." At the time, I had not given it much thought. James had always been careful with our affairs, but his words now carried deeper weight. As Violet strutted out of the kitchen, already holding her phone, I remembered another thing James had told me during his final weeks. "You have always been too kind, Ellie," he said, his voice frail but his eyes sharp. "Sometimes kindness must be protected." The grandfather clock in the hallway struck 8 times. In 4 hours, we would all assemble at Mr. Peterson's law office for the reading of James's will. Violet was about to face an unexpected outcome. I ran my hand across the smooth kitchen countertop that James and I had chosen together after years of saving. This house was more than just a structure of walls and a roof. It stood as the tangible symbol of our love story. Every mark, every fix, every improvement told the tale of our shared experiences. As I took a sip of my coffee, I heard Tom coming down the stairs. He appeared in the kitchen with the uncertain steps of someone unsure of what to say. "Morning, Mom," he muttered, avoiding meeting my gaze. "Good morning, son," I responded, sliding a mug towards him. "Coffee?" He nodded and accepted the cup. "Mom, about the funeral yesterday. I'm sorry about the seating arrangement. Violet just thought it was okay," he began. But I cut him off, not wanting to listen to any excuse he might have practiced. We all mourn in our own ways. Tom seemed relieved that I would not make an issue of it. That had always been his approach, to steer clear of conflict at all costs, even if that meant letting Violet overpower his mother. "About the house," he started again, but I raised my hand to stop him. "Let's wait till the will reading before we talk about any changes, shall we?" He looked surprised, but agreed. From upstairs, Violet called his name, and like a well-trained dog, he immediately set down his barely touched coffee and went to her. I watched him leave, feeling a heavy weight inside. My son had a kind heart, but he had always been easily swayed, first by his ex-wife, now by Violet. I wondered what James would say if he could see how quickly Violet was trying to push me out of my own home. Actually, I knew exactly what he would say. "Just wait, Helen, just wait." Peterson's law firm had remained untouched for 2 decades. The same worn leather chairs, the identical mahogany desk, even the faded landscape paintings decorating the walls, all stayed unchanged. James always joked that entering Peterson's office felt like stepping into a preserved moment from the past. I sat silently, with my hands folded in my lap, as the others gradually arrived. Tom came in accompanied by Violet, who wore a black designer suit more fitting for a corporate takeover than a reading of a last will. She even carried a small notebook, as though preparing to catalogue her forthcoming inheritance. James's sister Martha showed up next, giving me a comforting hug, before settling into the seat beside me. She whispered, "How are you holding up, Helen?" While gently squeezing my hand, I answered quietly, "I'm managing." Martha had never taken a liking to Violet. She once confided in me after witnessing Violet deliberately leaving me out of the family photo at Tom's birthday, calling her warmth that of a serpent. From the start, Martha was the only one who saw through Violet's deceitful show. Mr. Peterson was the last to enter, carrying a leather portfolio. Now in his 70s, he was a contemporary of both James and me, and had overseen our legal affairs for many years. "Thank you all for coming," he said, as he adjusted his reading glasses. "We are here to review the last will and testament of James William Montgomery." Violet sat up straight in her chair, pen ready over her notebook. I noticed how she angled her body toward Tom, her posture clearly showing they were aligned. The unit was separate from me. "Before I proceed," Mr. Peterson stated, "I want to point out that James revised his will about 6 months ago. These amendments were made when he was in full possession of his mental faculties and legal competence." Violet's pen hovered midair as I noticed her cast a brief, concerned look at Tom. "I will start with the fundamental terms," Mr. Peterson said while opening the folder. "To my sister Martha Montgomery, I bequeath my collection of first edition books and the amount of $50,000. Martha nodded, lightly blotting her eyes with a handkerchief. "To my son Tom Montgomery, I leave my collection of classic cars, my woodworking tools, and my fishing cabin by Lake Tahoe." Tom appeared both surprised and pleased. He had always cherished that retreat. Furthermore, Mr. Peterson added, "I grant Tom $200,000 to be held in a trust and paid out in quarterly installments over 5 years. The satisfied expression on Violet's face wavered. "In a trust with quarterly payouts," she interrupted. "Why not a single payment?" Mr. Peterson looked at her over his spectacles. "I am merely reading the will as it is written, Mrs. Montgomery, if you kindly permit me to proceed." Violet became silent, though I could see the tightness in her jaw. "To my dear wife, Helen Montgomery, I leave our family residence at 1423 Maple Street, including all furniture and personal belongings within." I heard Violet's sharp intake of breath. "Additionally, I bequeath Helen the sum of $1 million. Funds from my life insurance policy, my investment holdings, and full control of Montgomery Consulting Group." The room fell utterly silent. Montgomery Consulting had been James's greatest pride, the company he had built from scratch into a thriving regional business. Everyone had assumed Tom would be the one to inherit it. "This has to be an error," Violet finally uttered. "James always planned for Tom to take over the company." Mr. Peterson shook his head. "There is no misunderstanding. James was very explicit about his wishes. But Helen has no experience managing a consulting firm," Violet argued, her calm beginning to falter. "She is merely a housewife." "Just a housewife," I repeated softly. "I worked closely with James for 2 decades before retiring. I helped him grow that business from our garage." Violet glanced at Tom, her eyes wide with shock. "Are you really going to accept this? Your father's company, your legacy passing to her?" Tom looked speechless, unable to respond. Mr. Peterson cleared his throat. "There is more. James included a personal letter to be revealed at this moment." He withdrew an envelope and began to read. "If this letter is being opened, then I am no longer here. To my beloved Helen, my partner in all things, thank you for 45 years of love and support. You have always been the foundation of my achievements, even when others failed to recognize it. To my son Tom, I love you deeply. I have watched with worry as you have allowed others to sway your decisions. Judgment should never come between you and your mother. I hope you will take time to consider what truly holds value in life. As for Violet, I have witnessed the way you have treated Helen throughout the years. Your efforts to isolate her and undermine her place in our family have been clear. Recently, you even implied that she is incapable of making decisions for herself. These deeds have not escaped notice. I have arranged my will to shield Helen from any further control. The house is solely hers. The business will provide her with both income and a sense of purpose. Tom, Your inheritance is designed to be fully yours, safeguarded from external interference. Violet's complexion paled. She stared at me with undisguised anger. You did this, she snarled. You manipulated a dying man. I met her unwavering gaze. James always made his own choices, Violet. He did it throughout his life. Then Mr. Peterson interrupted, appearing uneasy. James insisted that if Tom and Violet remain in the Montgomery residence, they must pay fair market rent to Helen, or else leave the property within 30 days. Violet rose so quickly her chair almost fell backward. This is unacceptable. We will challenge it. Mr. Peterson shook his head. I advised James carefully to make this will resistant to any disputes. He recorded Violet's conduct over the years, including conversations where she planned against Helen. Declared mentally unfit after his passing, Violet's lips moved but no sound emerged. Tom looked at her, shock clear across his face. He recorded our talks, Tom eventually whispered, his voice barely there. James had been meticulous, Mr. Peterson confirmed. He wanted to guarantee his wishes would be honored. I stayed silent, feeling no satisfaction in Violet's embarrassment. This was not about revenge. It was about safeguarding, just as James intended. I believe we should leave, Tom said to Violet, rising. He glanced at me, his eyes filled with confusion and pain. Mom, I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything now, I told him softly. Take time to absorb all of this. As they walked away, Martha sat beside me. Quietly, she said, James always thought of every detail. I nodded, tears finally streaming down. Even after death, James had found a way to protect me from Violet's harshness. His final gesture of love made sure I would not be abandoned or forgotten by my own family. He certainly did, I whispered, holding the copy of the will Mr. Peterson gave me. The paper felt firm and comforting in my hands. Clear proof that James had witnessed everything, understood it fully, and chose to shield what we built together. I just wondered what awaited me at home in a house where I was now undoubtedly the only one with authority to decide who belonged there. Returning home, I found the house in chaos. Violet clearly did not waste any time following the reading of the will. Drawers were left open, closets had been thoroughly searched, and several of my preferred decorative items had vanished. It seemed as if she was looking for something specific, or perhaps this was her method of expressing anger. I exhaled deeply, emotionally too spent to become furious. Martha had suggested coming over with me, but I declined. I required solitude to absorb everything that had transpired. While preparing tea, I suddenly heard the front door slam. Loud footsteps neared the kitchen, and Tom appeared in the doorway, his face flushed with rage. How could you do this to me? He asked abruptly. I carefully placed my teacup down and replied, Do what exactly? Turn Dad against me and Violet? Make him believe we were attempting to what? Remove you? Seize the house? I did not turn your father against anyone, Tom. He formed his own opinions and decisions. His tone was accusing. That is not what Violet claims. She says you have been feeding Dad lies about her for years, making him believe she was trying to push you out. A surge of sorrow washed over me. Even now, after what he had heard at the lawyer's office, he still trusted Violet's account over mine. Tom, when have I ever deceived you? He hesitated slightly and said, You have always been subtly manipulative, causing Dad to feel guilty for spending time with us instead of you. I quietly asked, Is that what Violet told you? She says you... He resented her from the start because she took your place as the most significant woman in his life. I could not help but laugh, not out of amusement but pure disbelief. Tom, you are 43 years old. I never expected to be the most important woman in your life since you were a teenager. All I ever wished for was to receive simple respect and to be included in family events. Dad's will is completely unjust. I should have inherited the business. I have been working there for 5 years as a vice president who arrives late and leaves early. I reminded him that the position his father created was for him because he could not keep a job elsewhere. His face grew even redder. That is not true, Tom. You were dismissed from 3 companies before your father employed you. The company has been supporting you, not the other way around. Violet was right, he murmured. You are just a resentful old woman who cannot bear to see others happy. The word hurt, but I refused to reveal it. Instead, I headed to the study, opened the bottom drawer of James's desk, and took out a thick folder. Your father kept records, I said, returning to the kitchen, not because I asked him to, but because he worried about what would happen to me when he was gone. I laid out the contents on the table. There were pictures of Violet rifling through my private documents when she thought nobody was watching, as well as printed emails where she talked to friends about her plans to put the old lady in a nursing home. A record of dates and moments when family events were arranged, especially at times I could not be present. Then came the recordings. I played one on my phone. I am eagerly waiting until James is out of the picture. Violet's voice resonated clearly. Helen will never know what struck her. We will have her declared legally incapable so swiftly she will be disoriented. The house, the fortune, everything will be ours. Tom looked at the proof, his face losing color. This could be altered, twisted out of its original meaning. There are numerous recordings, Tom, spanning over 3 years. Your father might have been ill, but he was not foolish. I played another. Tom is incredibly easy to manipulate. Once again, Violet's voice. He trusts every word I say about his mother. It is almost pathetic how naive he is. Tom recoiled as though I had physically struck him. I spoke softly. Your father never wanted you to see these. He hoped Violet would reform, or that you would realize the truth on your own. Yet he made certain I would have backup in case neither occurred. Tom slumped into a chair, his fury fading. Why did you never reveal anything? Would you have believed me? Or would you have gone to Violet, who would have convinced you I was fabricating stories? His silence spoke volumes. I do not hold you entirely responsible, Tom. Violet is cunning and persuasive, but you elected to accept the worst about your mother, a woman who never gave you cause to question her integrity. Tom fixed his gaze on the stack of evidence. He examined the evidence carefully, then wiped his face with his hands. Dad really had recorded everything. I nodded. After his diagnosis, he grew deeply worried about what might happen to me. He noticed how Violet was already maneuvering to seize control of the business and the trust holding my inheritance. He wanted to ensure Violet could not access your money or take command of the company. He was safeguarding you as well, Tom. A heavy silence settled between us. I could see Tom wrestling with the reality of what was true versus the version Violet had convinced him was real. The front door opened quietly. Violet appeared in the doorway and froze when she spotted the document spread out on the table. What is all this? She asked, her voice falsely cheerful. It is the truth, I answered plainly. Her eyes shifted to Tom, then back to me. Tommy, don't tell me you believe this. She obviously made all this up after James died. The timestamps and certificates of authentication say something else, I replied calmly, as do the witnesses who assisted James in recording your behavior. Violet's mask began to crumble. You think you're so smart, don't you? Turning James against me from his deathbed. James was never against you until you gave him a reason, I said. All he wanted was for his family to be united, for his wife to be respected. Respected, Violet sneered. You are nothing but an old woman clinging to your late husband's shadow your entire life. Tom suddenly stood up. Enough, Violet. She looked at him, startled. Tom, my name is Thomas, not Tommy. And I want you to stop speaking to my mother like that. Violet's expression changed, her eyes growing wide with deliberate innocence. I'm simply upset, darling. Helen has turned everything upside down with these absurd claims. I listened to your voice on those recordings, Thomas said softly. That was you, not some trick. Recordings can be altered, she insisted desperately. You know how clever she is. My mother has always been truthful with me, Thomas said firmly. I am the one who has been dishonest with myself about what is going on in this family. Violet's face grew cold. So you are choosing her instead of me, your pitiful mother instead of your wife? I am choosing the truth, Thomas answered, and I am finally seeing it clearly. Violet glanced from Thomas to me, her eyes narrowing. This is not finished, she hissed. You will regret this, both of you. She stormed out, the front door banging shut so hard the windows shook. Thomas turned to me, his face a mix of shame and confusion. Mom, I do not know what to say. I have been so blind. I reached across the table and took his hand. You saw what you wished to see, Thomas. We all do sometimes. How can you forgive me so easily after all I have allowed to happen? I smiled sadly. Because that is what mothers do. And because your father. Helen wanted us to bring this family back together, not tear it apart even more. Tom held my hand tightly. I admitted, I have no idea what will happen next. Neither do I, he said. But for the first time in a long time, I feel like maybe we can figure it out together. The weeks that followed felt like a slow-motion earthquake shaking everything left of our family. Tom started living in the downstairs guest room, while Violet stayed with her sister in another part of town. They were not officially separated yet, but the distance between them grew wider every day. I felt no pleasure in their struggles. Despite all that Violet had done, she was still Tom's choice, and seeing my son suffer brought me no peace. One morning, I found Tom sitting on the back porch, gazing at the garden James had lovingly cared for. Spring was here, and the first daffodils were just beginning to sprout from the ground. Dad used to say you could set your watch by these flowers, Tom said as I joined him. He planted those bulbs the year you were born, I told him as I sat next to him. He said they were as dependable as he hoped you would be. Tom gave a faint smile before it disappeared. I have not been very dependable, have I? Not to him. Not to you. I spoke softly. You have endured so much. Finding out that your wife is not who you believed is never easy. He shook his head. That is the thing, Mom. I believe I always knew deep down somehow. There were times when I caught her telling little untruths or noticed how she treated people she deemed unimportant, but I chose to overlook it. We often perceive only what we want in those we care about. Violet called again last night, he said after a pause. She wants to meet with our lawyers to talk about a settlement. A settlement? She claims she deserves half of my inheritance since we were married when Dad passed away. I sighed. Even now, Violet was still fixated on what she could claim. What did you say to her? That Dad placed my inheritance in a trust specifically to shield it from divorce claims. Tom ran a hand through his hair. She did not react well. I could easily imagine Violet's fury, when stopped in her tracks, was like a natural storm. She had also been reaching out to my cousins, Aunt Martha, and even some of my co-workers, spreading stories that I had abandoned her and that you influenced me. That did not shock me. Violet had always been adept at creating stories that portrayed her as the victim. I'm sorry, Tom. I know this is tough. He looked at me steadily. I am the one who should apologize, Mom. I let her push you away. I believed her when she said you were controlling or manipulative. I was a terrible son. You were not terrible, I protested, just misguided. That is kind of you to say. He gave a faint smile. I've been considering moving out, finding a place of my own, giving you back your space. A sharp feeling of sadness washed over me. After years of feeling excluded from I was finally rebuilding my connection with my son's life. The idea of him leaving so soon felt like facing yet another loss. I told him you do not have to leave. This house has more than enough space for both of us. He asked if I was sure. I reassured him that after everything, Tom, this place is your home as well. Your father would want you to be here, especially now. His eyes shimmered with tears that had not fallen yet. He thanked me warmly. Later that day, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, my grandchildren, Emma and Jack, were standing outside with their backpacks. At 15 and 12 years old, they were caught between childhood and adulthood, too old for toys, but too young for grown-up talks. I noticed Tom's ex-wife Karen in the driveway, waving briefly before driving away. Jack eagerly called out, "Grandma!" gave me a quick hug, and rushed inside to see his father. Emma, more like her father in temperament, simply smiled shyly. She said, "Hi, Grandma. Dad said we could stay here this weekend. Is that all right?" I assured her it was always all right, and stepped aside to welcome her in. I had not spent much time with my grandchildren in recent years, because Violet usually found reasons that visits to Grandma's home were inconvenient or unnecessary. Even when they did visit, she would watch every moment closely, as though worried I might say something that could challenge her authority. I told Emma that her room was just how she had left it, except maybe the stuffed animals looked a little too childish for her now. She smiled and said she did not mind, following me upstairs. I recall how Dad used to read to us in that very room whenever we came to visit. Indeed, he did, I confirmed, smiling at the fond memory. Your grandfather would sit in that rocking chair by the window, while your dad performed all the voices of the characters. Emma placed her backpack on the bed and looked around the room. Violet mentioned you were getting rid of all the children's belongings. She also said our rooms were being transformed into some sort of art studio. I blinked, taken aback. I would never do such a thing. These rooms will always remain here for you. Emma seemed to weigh this, comparing it against whatever story Violet had created. She also claimed you did not really want us to visit, that it was too inconvenient for you. The thought of my grandchildren believing I did not want them here hurt deeply. Emma, that is simply not true. I have always longed to see more of you and Jack, always have. That is also what Dad said, though now he hesitated, struggling to explain the current situation. Now that he's clearer, I added softly. She nodded and unexpectedly asked, "Was Violet always unkind to you, Grandma?" The question caught me off guard. I paused, reluctant to speak ill of their stepmother, but unwilling to lie. Violet and I had different views on family, I answered carefully. Sometimes that caused tension. Emma's sharp look showed she understood more than I was expressing. She did not like when Dad paid attention to you or us. She always desired to be the center of attention. From the mouths of babes, they say. That must have been tough for you and Jack. Emma shrugged with the effortless ease of a teenager who had seen it all. We learned to accept it. Dad changed when she was around, less carefree, more focused on keeping her pleased. I sat on the edge of the bed, gesturing to the space next to me. Emma joined, her long legs stretching out before her, so like her father's. Your dad loves you deeply, I told her. Sometimes adults lose their way or misjudge what really matters, but that never lessens his love for you. I know, she whispered. He seems lighter now, even though he still mourns Violet. Does that make sense? It makes perfect sense, I reassured her. Below, I heard Jack's lively voice as he showed Tom something on his tablet. The sound of male laughter, so reminiscent of James, filled the home in a way it had not for many years. That night, we gathered around the kitchen table for dinner. Tom ordered pizza, and afterward we played board games. Simple moments that had once been common in our family, but had disappeared under Violet's shadow. Watching Tom laugh with his children stirred mixed feelings in me. Happiness to see my son's playful side re-emerge, the father who had been suppressed by Violet's control. Sadness, too, knowing it took James's death and such heartache for him to return. Later, once the children were asleep, Tom found me in the study flipping through old photo albums. "They have missed you," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "We all have, honestly." I lifted my eyes to my son, who resembled his father so much under the soft glow of the lamp. "I have missed you too. Every one of you. I want to make things right, Mom. I want to be the son Dad would be proud of." A smile spread across my face, a feeling of warmth unrelated to the gentle spring evening. "You already are, Tom. You really are." 6 months following James's passing, I finally felt prepared to alter the house. Not vast renovations, but subtle changes, that would make the place truly mine. For years, every choice had been a joint effort. James loved blue, I favored green, so teal became our compromise. He leaned toward contemporary, I preferred classic, so we agreed on a blend of both styles. Now I could at last paint the kitchen the soft sage green I had always dreamed of. I could swap the heavy curtains in the living room for the sheer ones James had always dismissed as too delicate. Tom assisted me in shifting furniture and painting on weekends. Occasionally, Emma and Jack joined in, turning chores into family bonding. The home started to evolve, not into something unfamiliar, but into a cozier, brighter version of what it was. Dad would have hated these curtains, Tom quipped one afternoon, as we hung the new window treatments in the living room. Your father was a wonderful man with terrible taste, I answered, causing him to chuckle. The divorce battle between Tom and Violet had become bitter, as was anticipated. She fought fiercely over every possible claim and fabricated complaints where there were none. However, the prenuptial agreement James had demanded when they married, another demonstration of my husband's foresight, limited what she could gain. The judge saw right through her, Tom confided after a particularly heated court session. She attempted to accuse me of abuse and claimed I had hindered her career, but she failed to provide a single witness to support her accusations. I was not surprised. Violet had always relied on manipulation and deceit, keeping up a carefully crafted image that only those closest to her could see through. Without Tom to protect her, that image was falling apart. One afternoon, while I was planting tulip bulbs for the next spring in the garden, a familiar car drove into the driveway. Violet stepped out, looking immaculate as ever in a neat suit. Her blonde hair was styled perfectly smooth. I stood upright, brushing my hands on my gardening apron. Violet, this is unexpected. She approached cautiously, stopping a few feet away. Helen, you look well. Thank you, I replied, waiting for her to explain why she was here. I suppose you are enjoying all of this, she said, vaguely motioning toward the house. Playing the victim, driving Tom against me. Taking everything that should have rightfully belonged to us. I never sought any of this, Violet. All I ever wished for was to be treated with dignity and to feel included in my family's life. She scoffed, always so self-righteous, so flawless. Helen Montgomery, the virtuous widow who supposedly never errs. I exhaled sharply, suddenly too exhausted for this discussion. What do you want, Violet? I want what is rightfully mine. Tom is being utterly unreasonable about how the assets are divided. I deserve half of everything, including this house. This house was never yours to claim, I reminded her firmly. It belonged to James and me. Now it belongs solely to me. I resided here as well, she retorted sharply. I helped redo the kitchen. I picked the new carpet for upstairs. You made those decisions without consulting me, I cut in. You altered my home as if I were invisible, as if my thoughts did not count. Violet's calm facade wavered momentarily. You were always a nuisance, always the sorrowful mother-in-law, pressuring Tom to visit more often, to call more frequently. Is that really how you perceived me? I asked, genuinely intrigued. Like some manipulative elderly woman trying to steal your husband's affection. What else could I have assumed? You were constantly there with your anecdotes about Tom's childhood, your private jokes with James. You had decades with them before I arrived. What was left for me? For the first time, I saw something genuine beneath. Violet's calculated exterior revealed insecurity or possibly even fear. She had always viewed me as a rival rather than family. Marriage is not a contest, Violet. Love is not a finite resource that disappears if you share it too broadly. She averted her gaze, blinking rapidly. Easy for you to say. You had James wrapped around your finger for 45 years. I had a partnership with James. We respected and supported one another. That is what made our marriage succeed. Violet remained silent for quite some time. Then, straightening her posture, she appeared to recall the reason for her visit. I want $50,000 to relinquish my claim to the lake vacation property. Otherwise, I will extend this legal battle for years." I examined her face, the firm set of her jaw, the chill that had returned to her eyes. The glimpse of vulnerability I had seen was gone. "I will talk it over with Tom," I said at last. "But Violet, you should realize James documented everything. Every threat you made to push me out, every scheme to declare me incompetent. Fighting this will only bring more of that evidence into the courtroom." Her eyes grew slightly wider, then narrowed. "You are bluffing." "I have no reason to bluff. The house is mine. The business is mine. I fear you no longer, Violet." She stared long at me, then turned and walked back to her car without speaking again. As she drove away, I noticed my hands trembled, but not from fear. The first time, I stood firm alongside Violet without James or Tom supporting me. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. Violet received a settlement that was reasonable, but much less than she had initially demanded. Soon after, she relocated to Phoenix and accepted a position at a rival consulting company. "She's already seeing one of the senior partners there," Tom told me with a knowing smile. "The poor man has no idea what awaits him." On the 1-year anniversary of James's passing, I decided to organize a family dinner. It was not a sad remembrance, but a joyful tribute to the life we had shared, and the family still together. Martha came, as did Tom, Emma, and Jack. Even Karen joined us, our relationship having much improved without Violet's interference. I set the dining table with our finest china, the same set James and I had received as a wedding gift many years ago. In the center, I placed fresh garden flowers, dahlias, James's favorite, and lit candles in the silver holders that had belonged to his mother. As everyone took their seats, I paused for a moment before sitting at the head of the table. James's place for over 40 years. It felt unusual, yet somehow fitting. "To Dad," Tom said, raising his glass, who showed me what it means to be a good man, even if it took me too long to understand. "To James," Martha added, "my big brother who always cared for everyone he loved." Emma and Jack joined in with, "To Grandpa." I lifted my own glass in silent tribute. Glass in hand, I gazed at the faces of my family gathered around the table. To James, who understood us better than we understood ourselves, and who ensured we would find our way back to each other even when he could not be present to lead us. We clinked glasses, the crystal chiming like a melody in the cozy candlelit room. Later, once everyone had left and the house fell into silence, I sat in James's favorite chair and took in the surroundings of the home we had created together. The walls now bore the colors I had picked, the furniture arranged just as I liked, and the garden outside flourished with blossoms I had nurtured with my own hands. Yet James remained everywhere, in the sturdy craftsmanship of the bookshelves he had built, in the creaky third step of the staircase he never got around to repairing, in the dents and scratches that told the story of our shared life. "You planned everything so well," I whispered as if he could listen. "You made certain I would be safe, that Tom would be here for me, that this house would always be our refuge." I could almost hear his answer, the phrase he used when I praised his foresight. "I just know what truly matters, Helen. Everything else is just details." I smiled, trailing my hand over the armrest of his chair, feeling the familiar hollow where he had rested his elbow during countless evenings. The sorrow of losing him would never fully vanish, but it had softened into something manageable, even cherished, a testament to enduring love. That had influenced my entire adulthood. As I rose to switch off the lights before going to sleep, I noticed my reflection in the hallway mirror. I stood a little taller now, my eyes brighter, my smile more sincere. I was no longer just James's wife or Tom's mother, identities that had long defined me. I was Helen Montgomery, a woman who had discovered her own resilience despite loss and betrayal. For the first time since James's passing, I experienced not only acceptance of my changed circumstances, but also a quiet, steady happiness in the journey ahead. a future that was finally truly mine. Now, I wonder about those who hear my tale. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Have you faced something like this before? Share your thoughts below. Meanwhile, on the last screen, I am leaving 2 more stories that are popular on this channel and will surely astonish you. Thank you for staying with me until the end.